Most manufacturers want you to remember their greatest hits. But what if I told you that some motorcycles were so catastrophically bad, they literally bankrupted their own companies? Bikes that looked promising in the press release, but turned into rolling disasters the moment they hit the streets. In this video, we're counting down 20 motorcycles that manufacturers desperately want to erase from history, ranked from number 20 to number 1, based on how badly they failed. And trust me, some of these disasters are absolutely legendary. From bikes that seize their engines mid-ride, to models that cost over $100,000 to build but sold for a fraction of that price, these failures exposed every weakness in motorcycle manufacturing. And here's the kicker. The number 1 bike on this list had a 100% failure rate and literally killed its own manufacturer. Stick with me to the end, because this isn't just about bad bikes. It's about corporate disasters so severe that entire companies collapsed under the weight of their own mistakes. Number 20, BMW F650 Funduro. The 1993 BMW F650 Funduro arrived with considerable fanfare and ambitious marketing promises. BMW positioned it as a revolutionary dual-sport motorcycle that would bridge the gap between serious off-road capability and comfortable street riding. The company suggested riders could confidently tackle challenging trails on Saturday and smoothly commute through city traffic on Monday, all with the same machine. This promise was a lie, or at best, a severe misunderstanding of what riders actually needed. The Funduro failed to excel in either environment, satisfying neither serious off-road enthusiasts nor dedicated street riders. It existed in a frustrating middle ground where every strength was undermined by a corresponding weakness, stemming from its dual-purpose design philosophy. The problem was fundamental and rooted in basic engineering physics. When you design a bike to do two highly specialized things, you inevitably end up with something that's mediocre at both. The weight distribution and component selection made it too cumbersome for serious trail riding, where lighter, more nimble machines could dance through technical sections that left the Funduro wallowing. The suspension, while theoretically capable off-road, lacked the precision tuning that dedicated dirt bikes offered. Meanwhile, the compromises necessary for off-road capability, longer suspension travel, knobby tires, upright seating position, and overall rough and ready construction made it unsatisfying on pavement compared to purpose-built street bikes. Number 19, Suzuki Madura. The 1985 Suzuki Madura was conceived as a direct stylistic rival to Honda's popular Magna Cruiser. Honda had found considerable success with the Magnus formula, and Suzuki naturally wanted a piece of that profitable market segment. But in their attempt to differentiate the Madura and make it stand out from the competition, Suzuki's designers went dramatically overboard with excessive, unbalanced styling choices that prioritized visual impact over aesthetic harmony. They added more engine displacement to claim performance superiority. They added an oversized sissy bar that dominated the rear profile. Paradoxically, they reduced the fuel tank capacity, presumably to achieve a certain visual proportion. The cumulative effect of these decisions created what can only be described as an aesthetic disaster, a motorcycle that looked confused about its own identity. The result was particularly noticeable at the rear end, which critics noted appeared to hover in space, disconnected from the rest of the machine. The massive sissy bar created visual weight that the reduced tank couldn't balance, resulting in proportions that seemed fundamentally wrong to the trained eye. The Madura proved decisively that aggressive styling differentiation can backfire spectacularly when the design becomes unbalanced and awkward. Number 18, Ducati Indiana. In 1986, Ducati made one of the more puzzling strategic decisions in its corporate history by deciding to enter the cruiser market with a model they named the Indiana. This was already a questionable decision for a brand internationally renowned for passionate Italian sport bikes, racing heritage, and the distinctive character of their L-twin engines in performance applications. But Ducati's brand identity was firmly rooted in the sport and racing segments. Entering the cruiser market represented a dramatic departure that confused existing customers while failing to attract new ones. The execution was even worse than the strategic miscalculation. The Indiana was a self-conscious, almost painfully obvious attempt to follow the styling pattern that Japanese manufacturers like Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki were using to imitate American cruisers from Harley-Davidson and Indian. Rather than bringing distinctive Italian design flair to the cruiser segment, Ducati simply copied what others were already copying, resulting in a third-generation imitation that lacked any authentic character. Critics described the aesthetic result as being as sexy as a hairy mole, about as damning a description as motorcycle journalism can offer. Even the model name was ridiculed for its unfortunate similarity to the Moto Guzzi Nevada, another Italian manufacturer's cruiser that had its own identity problems. The confusion over naming suggested Ducati hadn't even bothered to properly research the competitive landscape before launching. Number 17. Brammo Victory Empulse. The Brammo Empulse represented significant ambition in the emerging electric motorcycle market, positioning itself as one of the pioneering electric sport bikes at a time when the technology was still experimental and unproven. After Polaris Industries acquired Brammo's motorcycle assets and rebranded the bike as the Victory Empulse to leverage the Victory motorcycle's name, the early design flaws that had been somewhat overlooked in the startup phase became impossible to ignore under corporate scrutiny and broader market exposure. The primary safety issue was transmission oil leaking from the breather tube, a flaw that might sound minor but had potentially catastrophic consequences. Under certain specific conditions, particularly high revs in cold weather, when oil viscosity and pressure differentials created the perfect storm, the oil would be thrown from the breather onto the rear fender and, more critically, onto the rear tire itself. This created a terrifying risk of suddenly losing rear tire grip at precisely the wrong moment, potentially during acceleration or mid-corner, when the rider was leaned over and dependent on traction. The recurring nature of this safety flaw highlighted the dangerous complexity of first-generation electric vehicle development, where enthusiasm for new technology sometimes overshadowed basic engineering validation. Number 16. Suzuki RE5. The 1974 Suzuki RE5 stands as one of motorcycling's most ambitious technical experiments and one of its most complete commercial failures. The bike featured a sophisticated rotary Wankel engine that was genuinely impressive from an engineering standpoint, smooth, compact for its displacement, and mechanically elegant. Operationally, however, it was an absolute disaster that made daily riding nearly impossible. The primary problem was extreme fuel inefficiency that made the bike practically unusable for normal riding patterns. The rotary engine's combustion characteristics and sealing challenges resulted in fuel consumption rates that shocked even riders accustomed to thirsty motorcycles. One particularly telling owner testimony reported that a daily 105-mile commute required hitting the fuel reserve tank halfway through the journey every single day. Think carefully about that scenario for a moment. You couldn't even complete a basic, predictable commute without running dangerously low on fuel and switching to reserve. This wasn't occasional. It was the normal operating experience. For any rider whose motorcycle serves as actual transportation rather than weekend recreation, such fuel consumption is completely unacceptable. It transforms every ride into an exercise in range anxiety and fuel stop planning. Number 15. Harley-Davidson Super Glide FX. The 1971 Super Glide FX holds a paradoxical place in motorcycle history, simultaneously pioneering and reviled, influential in concept, but initially disastrous in execution. The bike was historically significant as an early factory custom, designed by the legendary Willie G. Davidson himself, with the ambitious goal of merging the nimble handling characteristics of the Sportster with the big bike aesthetic presence of the FLH touring models. The fundamental concept was absolutely sound and would eventually prove influential in creating the entire factory custom segment. The execution, however, was immediately and almost universally hated by the very custom bike enthusiasts it was supposed to attract. Contemporary reviews compared the initial Super Glide unfavorably to dog farts, which is approximately as harsh as motorcycle criticism gets, and suggests deep, visceral rejection rather than mere aesthetic disagreement. The specific design choice that doomed the initial launch and earned such contemptuous reviews was the inclusion of a fiberglass rear fender, that was painted in a garish color scheme and featured a styling profile that nobody in the custom bike community had ever used or wanted. This single styling element completely marred the intended custom chopper appearance that was supposed to define the bike's identity. Number 14, Victory Vision. The Victory Vision was mechanically competent and even sophisticated in several important respects. It featured a fully gear-driven primary system that was more durable than belt drives, incorporated linked ABS brakes that provided balanced stopping power and enhanced safety, and included replaceable tip-over protection designed to minimize damage from parking lot drops. All genuinely thoughtful engineering decisions. These considerable technical strengths were completely overshadowed and ultimately commercially doomed by radical, bulbous styling that confused potential buyers and actively repelled many who might have otherwise appreciated the engineering excellence. The aesthetic was widely described as overly swoopy, excessively curved, and fundamentally unbalanced in its proportions. Multiple critics compared its appearance to the unfortunate love child of a custom chopper and a Honda Goldwing 2 motorcycle genres with completely incompatible design philosophies, designed so hastily that everything appeared visually blown backwards as if the entire bike had been in a wind tunnel accident. The bodywork dominated the motorcycle's presence in ways that drew attention to the styling, rather than integrating harmoniously with the mechanical components. Number 13, BMW R1200 CLC. BMW's attempt to penetrate the lucrative American cruiser market with the R1200 CLC represents one of the more tone-deaf product decisions in the company's motorcycling history. The bike was widely mocked for its clumsy, almost comically obvious imitation of domestic American cruiser styling, specifically including a batwing fairing, a component with deep cultural associations to Harley-Davidson touring models. The batwing fairing isn't merely a functional component, it's a styling element loaded with cultural significance in American motorcycle culture, strongly identified with Harley's Electroglide and its descendants. When BMW adopted this distinctly American styling cue, they weren't just borrowing a design element, they were making a statement that they understood American cruiser culture. The problem was that everything about the execution demonstrated they absolutely did not understand that culture. Compounding the fundamental error of cultural appropriation, BMW's designers made the baffling decision to place 4 headlights into the batwing fairing, a choice that improved absolutely nothing while making the bike look confused about its own identity. Traditional batwings feature a single prominent headlight that provides clear frontal identity. BMW's 4-light arrangement looked like indecision rendered in plastic and glass. Number 12, Honda PC800 Pacific Coast. The PC800 Pacific Coast represented Honda's well-intentioned but ultimately misguided effort to attract car drivers to motorcycling by offering an experience characterized by extensive bodywork, automatic storage, and minimal maintenance requirements. Honda believed there was a substantial market of potential riders who were intimidated by traditional motorcycles and would embrace something that felt more car-like in its enclosed, protected character. Critics immediately and derisively dubbed it the plastic motorcycle, a nickname that stuck because of the bike's overwhelmingly extensive plastic bodywork that covered virtually every mechanical component. The styling was harshly derided by motorcycle enthusiasts and press alike, with observers noting it looked as though designers had simply mushed the front fender, saddlebags, and fuel tank all together in one grotesque, undifferentiated piece of molded plastic. The overwhelming plastic fairing and deliberately sanitized aesthetics led traditional riders to view it dismissively as a motorcycle designed for someone who had always secretly wanted a scooter but felt they needed something nominally larger. This comparison to scooters intended as an insult in motorcycle culture captured the PC800's fundamental problem. It removed too many of the elements that make motorcycling viscerally appealing to enthusiasts. Number 11, Ducati Paso. Designed by Massimo Tamburini, the 1986 Ducati Paso was radically despised for its fully integrated, uniform bodywork that entirely encased the mechanical components. This was a stark departure from Ducati's traditional visible trellis frame and performance styling that enthusiasts expected. Critics asserted the bike looked like a 1987 Honda Hurricane smashed into a Suzuki RF900. The aesthetic failure earned it an ignoble nickname, the ugliest pasta rocket ever. The Paso demonstrated that Ducati buyers expected visible Italian sport heritage, not covered up, homogeneous styling borrowed from Japanese manufacturers. When you hide what makes a Ducati special, you destroy what people are paying for. Number 10, Indian Scout Bobber. The Indian Scout Bobber has been consistently criticized for prioritizing aggressive aesthetic appeal at the expense of actual rideability. The design sacrifices resulted in an ergonomic disaster that provides what many owners describe as genuine physical punishment. The small 3.3-gallon fuel tank restricts useful range to a mere 120 to 130 miles per fill-up, turning day trips into logistical nightmares focused on finding gas stations. This profound discomfort translates directly into catastrophic financial loss, with owners reporting losing 30 to 40% of their investment within the first year. That steep depreciation reflects the market's recognition that most owners quickly abandon the bike because they literally cannot tolerate riding it for extended periods. Number 9, Hyosung motorcycles. Hyosung entered the US market in 2005 seeking to establish itself in the budget motorcycle segment. The brand's presence never solidified, largely due to the reputation earned by its early models. Most older Hyosung motorcycles are considered highly unreliable, characterized by unreliable engines and poor quality parts. Although many examples remain available in the used market, consumers are actively advised to avoid them due to high maintenance and repair costs associated with systemic component failure. This endemic quality issue meant Hyosung failed to build the necessary trust for long-term viability in Western markets. When your brand becomes synonymous with unreliability, you're finished before you start. Number 8, Harley-Davidson Sportster XLS 1000 Roadster. The 1980 Sportster model is intrinsically linked to what historians call the Harley Dark Ages, a period defined by corporate ownership by AMF and steep declines in manufacturing quality. The XLS 1000 Roadster was a notorious example of this decline. The motorcycle was critically received as disastrously underpowered and overpriced for its time. This profound failure of performance combined with poor value nearly resulted in the discontinuation of the entire Sportster line. That would have been catastrophic for Harley-Davidson's model range, and the company had to fight hard to overcome this damage after regaining independence from AMF. Number 7, Honda DN01. The 2008 Honda DN01 was billed as an innovative crossover blending cruiser, sport bike, and scooter characteristics. This identity proved confusing, and the execution was fatally flawed. The centerpiece was the hydromechanical automatic transmission, which provided smooth twist-and-go operation, but was inherently complex, heavy, and expensive. The result was an underpowered, overweight, overpriced bike that failed to deliver adequate performance for its price point. It quickly ran out of speed next to conventional motorcycles. Coupled with a design that looked strange and offered insufficient protection for touring, the DN01 was an answer to a question no customer had asked. Honda's subsequent abandonment of this transmission system in favor of the dual-clutch transmission confirms the DN01 was a failed experiment they'd rather forget. Number 6, Honda Valkyrie Rune. The 2003 Honda Valkyrie Rune represents one of the most significant financial miscalculations in modern motorcycling. Honda created a radical, over-engineered cruiser featuring a massive 1832cc, flat-six engine, and distinctive trailing link front suspension. The cost to produce each unit was approximately $100,000. Despite selling the bike for only $27,000 and producing it in extremely limited numbers, the total research and development expenditure resulted in an estimated financial loss of $225 million. The Rune was undeniably an engineering masterpiece, but its failure demonstrates that technical brilliance and polarizing aesthetics cannot compensate for catastrophic market forecasting. This is the benchmark for financial folly in motorcycle manufacturing. Number 5, Kawasaki H2 Mach IV. In the early 1970s, the Kawasaki H2 Mach IV perfectly embodied raw power philosophy with its extreme speed, courtesy of a powerful two-stroke engine. The defining flaw was a severe design mismatch. Engineers provided too much power in a frame not built to handle it properly. Riders struggled intensely with weak handling, ineffective brakes, and notorious instability that rendered the bike fundamentally unsafe for typical road use. The H2's inability to translate raw horsepower into predictable control earned it the infamous nickname Widowmaker. Insurance companies refused to cover them. Safety regulators targeted them specifically. This is a reputation Kawasaki would desperately like erased from history. Number 4. Buell 1125R and 1125CR. The Buell 1125R and its naked counterpart were meant to usher in a new performance era for the American brand. Instead, they were woefully underdeveloped at launch. The most severe manifestation was a critical mechanical defect affecting 140 units from 2008 and 2009 model years. The issue was premature failure of the plastic rear cylinder cam chain tension guide. When this guide broke, plastic debris would block the oil pump screen, leading to immediate oil starvation. This inevitably caused engine seizure, which creates the highly dangerous outcome of rear-wheel lockup while moving. This chronic high-risk unreliability contributed significantly to public perception of Buell as an inherently flawed brand, preceding its eventual termination by Harley-Davidson. Number 3. Suzuki TL1000S. The 1997 Suzuki TL1000S was designed around its massive 996cc V-twin engine. To accommodate this powerful engine, Suzuki utilized a defective solution for rear suspension, a rotary-style damper mounted remotely rather than in a conventional centerline position. The technical failure was rooted in the damper's complexity and insufficient thermal management. After approximately 600 miles, the small volume of hydraulic fluid would overheat during major swing arm movements, rendering the damper utterly ineffective, as supportive as a cloud. When this lack of rear support combined with raw, torquey V-twin power, the bike became dangerously unstable, earning the reputation as the world's best tank slapper. Suzuki's implicit admission of failure was quietly shuffling the model off the market in 2001, rather than issuing a comprehensive recall and redesigning the suspension. Number 2. Harley-Davidson Street 500 and 750. The Harley-Davidson Street series was intended as an affordable entry point for new riders, but quickly became an object of intense disdain. The cultural rejection stemmed from abandoning traditional pushrod, air-cooled motors for liquid-cooled engines, meaning the bikes didn't sound, look, feel, or ride like traditional Harleys. Beyond cultural offense, the models suffered documented dangerous mechanical failures. Owners widely reported terrible and cheap build quality. The safety flaws were critical. Brake calipers corroded and wore prematurely, necessitating massive global recalls. In 2018 alone, Harley recalled over 250,000 units for brake and clutch issues. The situation was so severe that Harley owners group members launched protests stating the faulty brakes posed a life threat. Additionally, numerous owners reported a dangerous fuel supply issue where the engine would momentarily lose fuel pressure under hard acceleration if the tank was below half capacity. This resulted in sudden engine braking followed by a violent lurch forward, risking rider control and causing neck strain. For a brand defined by its premium promise, the Street model's failure to uphold quality standards poisoned potential new customers and severely eroded brand equity. Number 1. Bimota V-Due. The 1997 Bimota V-Due was an ambitious attempt to deliver high-performance two-stroke technology while meeting emission standards. This machine was exotic, highly complex, and priced prohibitively at over $30,000. Despite its promise, the V-Due suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure rate that reached 100%. The bespoke direct fuel injection system, intended to be the engine's central innovation, proved incapable of reliable operation under real-world conditions. Every single bike failed. The resulting customer backlash forced Bimota to buy back every unit sold, leading directly to the company's bankruptcy. This is the definitive example of a motorcycle so bad it killed its own manufacturer. When your flagship product has a 100% failure rate and you're legally obligated to refund every customer, you don't recover. The V-Due represents the absolute peak of engineering hubris meeting catastrophic reality, and it's the failure Bimota would erase from history if they could. Speaking of forgotten bikes from this era, Check out my video on 17 motorcycles that were loved in the 80s and 90s but forgotten today, to see which once popular machines completely disappeared from the cultural memory despite being everywhere back then.